Fight Against Boredom's Starborne Players Podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Feca.
I'm Albendinger.
And I am Branxbro.
Now let's get this week's Fight Against Boredom started. So from today on, we'll be doing the show in front of a live Discord audience. Woo! Shout out to EXO for setting this all up. Be looking out for us in the official Starborne Discord. Moving on to this week's podcast, we're going to talk about leadership in Starborne, going over what it means to be a leader and how to lead from any position within your alliance. To help us with this concept today, we brought in arguably the most successful leader in Starborne's history, the man which we here at House Gravity plead our loyalty to and who taught many of us the game, Admiral.
Woo!
So,
Hey guys.
welcome, Admiral. So, to those under a rock, new or in denial, give us a rundown about you and your history with the Alliance Singularity that you want people years from now to now what you were all about.
Well, Singularity started up as a merger of three failed alliances in Alpha 6. One player, for the most part, Egg, single-handedly wrecked all three alliances back then. And, I was still learning the game and very much into it. So I brought whoever was still active together and formed Singularity. What I'd like people to know years from now, that, what I created was based off of core tenets of relationships, community, and positive sportsmanship.
Community, which is frankly what we've tried to teach here at our podcast. On our show, we've tried to carry that theme over, and that definitely directly came from you.
Yeah, and especially with such a small game, any game really in alpha, I think really does live by a lot of what the community puts out. And if someone comes and joins a game, one of the big parts, the reason I ended up joining Admiral is like it's stuff like not murdering anyone near you for absolutely no reason just because you want to get your kicks real quick right here. It was putting out these videos and actually being like, a small sign of hope where there's no information, the one guy actually doing something to, possibly help out. And how I actually reached out to him was, hey man, like, I know you're probably full, but going into the next alliance, I have this group of 10 guys and I'll just play alongside you. Even if we can't be in your alliance, I don't know how full you guys are, but like, I just want to help out your cause, and that's really where it all started. And he was like, no, we haven't actually recruited that much yet. Just come play actually with us. But I was willing to even put in the time, from that point.
Definitely changed the course of history for us three.
Yeah, I mean, like Gravity kind of just happened on server 1. Like all of the people that applied to join Admiral got like tossed into different groups. One of those groups is Gravity, and well, by chance, it just works out really well. Thanks for that, Admiral.
No problem. It was mostly you guys.
But yeah, in general, though, if we could touch on, I guess, from your point of view, like when you're starting these big servers, starting this, or, especially for new people to hear, what all really goes into that? Or like, what are your thought process, or how do you even begin with recruitment? Any kind of insight like that would be awesome.
It generally starts before the start of the server. We go on the general Discord. I post an advertisement, little production value, look at who's chatting, and the quality of, what they're saying. Are they toxic? Are they generally decent sounding people? And I'll just have a lot of one-on-one conversations like, hey, I'm recruiting. Here's our history. If you know anyone, friends welcome kind of deal. Like, for example, this alpha, we lost a lot of veterans since Alpha 9 server 1. And what we did was, with the remaining people we had who continued to play even after I stopped, it's like, hey, bring your friends and tell them to bring their friends. And it really just came down to that. As far as like, initial homework goes, it's mostly just kind of vetting out people and getting to know them, building that initial relationship.
Yeah, I remember that when we had the meeting with Space Marines, which in the BBC Coalition right now are called Supermassive, where we sat down with them and explained to them the core virtues of what this group values. Community positive and family, I think, were words that you mentioned. And that's the vetting part that I really enjoyed, like just sitting down with them, getting to know those people, and we kind of noticed pretty quickly that it was a good fit, I think.
Yeah. You go.
Sorry.
You got it.
I was just gonna say, like, that's one of the things I tell each person, at least I interface with, is, hey, you know, we don't want to troll, we don't want to bash, we don't want to be toxic to the community. We like, this is our chance to, you know, form the path for this game to have positive sportsmanlike behavior. And, you know, like, you know, in Eve, when there's a bunch of just toxic players out there, and then there's some good ones, but the thing is, you know, sometimes that overwhelming negativity will actually deter players, and I didn't want that for this game. This is like, you know, this is my game, this is the kind of culture I want. You know, I want to look forward to hanging out with my friends. I don't want to jump in and murder faces and trash talk them and then teabag them to boot. You might want to bleep that. I don't know.
No. You're good with that. We've said much worse at this point. But no, that is really cool, and it's another thing I really like to do as well. And, you know, like, we actually had that the first leadership meeting. It was like, you know, during work and midday, because you're often working, you know, with Europeans and on European time schedules. So a lot of that is a pretty interesting part of it. But really vetting it, because whether you really, like, truly believe it or not, like, you kind of, it's a culture not only to you guys, but anyone that sees you. You know, you'll constantly get blamed for everything being like in Sing block, or, you know, being part of Sing, and, you know, something that you might not even have done, you know, gets over, you know, a year, gets completely mutated into like, oh my God, I heard they did this one thing one time, you know, and managing that kind of stuff is really tough. And I think it really does start with, let's all have this giant leadership meeting, and what does it mean to us to be part of this alliance? What do we want to see from this? Making sure everyone's on the same page from, you know, the get-go.
For me, as long as that's just like a story that's attached to us, that like people need to say that we're like the big bad pre-made, they need to fight. But as long as sportsmanship is still a thing that's present, and we can like laugh together and talk respectively with each other, I don't care if people are like, oh, you're bad because you're playing with Singularity, and like, okay, let's fight, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind being like, quote unquote, bad guy, as long as like we're not, you know, we're not deterring people from the game. Like, if there's a big bad guy, like, you want to go fight against, that's helpful to the game. Like, it, like a positive way to have an arch nemesis, if you will, then, you know, I don't mind playing that role. But
yeah, the server we started on, Alpha 8, Server 5, there was a big group that was the sole leader on the server. But that inspired me to like wanting to do something about it, or seeing how far I could push it. Seeing someone that could, as many say, like raffle stomp everybody else, made me want to get to that level or close to, like, really learning the game, getting up there, competing with them. So I know it's not the same for everybody, but for me, when I see this like big pre-made group, it inspires me to work harder.
And I think that's a good point. What Singularity has seemingly represented is the big bad, even though we, you know, try to be that community positive alliance. But we represent the alliance that, you know, people maybe aspire to or just want to take down. Like, that's their version of beating the game. You know what I mean?
Kind of like on the current server, I know one of the recruitment messages for Kalala has been, we want to fight Admiral under the group. So that was their rallying cry, and they've managed to get a lot of people together to
their alternate win condition.
Since Omni wouldn't give us one, yeah.
But that's like, if that's what it takes to get people to play, I'm more than happy that that's how it worked out, right? If we can inspire people to form groups, to join up, to get to know each other, and then like continue playing with each other in the future, maybe, I think we've accomplished something good, whether it was intended or not, right?
And if we're considered bad guys, that's the absolute best thing. We're the best bad guys you could possibly face, because we really, I do try my best, like, you know, keep everything as positive as possible. You know, when someone does get a really good hit on you, don't go and just complain and get all upset. It's like, oh man, that was really good. Like, I'm coming back for you, but that was really good. You know, and I think trying to show the community what the way to run an alliance as far as like just being genuinely nice, even if we're your worst enemies, and to our best of our abilities, of course. You know.
Yeah, and it's showing respect for the enemy. Like back in when I got killed off in my first server, when my fireworks stand blew up, I reached out to the guy and was like, hey, you know, I tried and you got me. But, you know, I tried my thing, good fight, and, you know, respect your gameplay, bro.
Today's enemies could be tomorrow's allies. And, you know, think about it this way. When you play a board game with friends, are you going to turn around and hate them for life and do a blood oath to take them down well, maybe, but you know, but that's the idea, is like treat this as if it's a board game with friends or with strangers you want to potentially make friends out of.
The chat agreed with you on that one.
I don't want to take blood oaths against him or
yeah.
No, but all that stuff is really positive. And I think a lot of what we want to do with this podcast, now that we've kind of summed up really what I think our goals, ideally, at least your goals were ideally with Singularity, and then when I joined as well, and then my guys as well, our goals kind of aligned with that. But just what it's like to be a new leader in this game, or even if you're not a new leader, but you haven't had a ton of experience leading in general, or not new to the game per se. Like, what are things that you think, or that I guess any of us here really think is like the first things they should know that they're getting themselves into, like expectations they should have, and, you know, or maybe even how to take that first step if they're not a leader yet. Would you guys have any comments on that?
Expect to log in and manage queues.
Log in and manage queues, tell your players to do so. I think one of the big things is if you have it already, it's getting a Discord up or getting something that increases communication. I believe even when Starborne does get better in-game communication, because currently it's borderline impossible, would be still making sure communication is one of your top things. Because as a leader, I think that's how you're most effective, right?
Communication, organized communication, and education, and creating a community with a mindset of sharing what they've learned so that we can all contribute what we've learned and learn from each other. I still learn stuff I didn't know about just through our Discord server.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's I think if you think you're done learning, you're already a bad leader. And I'm going to put that out there. I won't say there's a lot of things that will make you bad at something, but like in just general in life, right? You want to constantly be learning, constantly be pushing. Because if you're not doing, your enemies certainly are, and they're going to be learning just fast, especially with a game like this where, you know, information in general, and something we do try to be better about, but you just can't always be. But it's a game where information is secretive, you know, and it's already an alpha game where there's not a lot of info out there. So, yeah.
Another idea, like when you're in a server and there's no alliances in your area, and you decide, okay, I'm going to try to create something. Take a look at your Politics My Alliance tab, and, you know, call the people who are not being active, you know, and by that I mean like 2 or 3 days you're not logged in. That means you're probably not active enough to be serious about this game, at least on a level that I am, or at least half the level I am. So, you know, and shoot them, don't just call them, but just shoot them a message if they are on Discord. Say, hey, we're removing you. It looks like you're inactive. Please reach out to us if you're going to come back. And like 99% of the time they don't. They don't even respond. So Call them, bring in active people, even if they're outside of your sector, but they're in a place that you can mutually benefit. You know, that will right there will put you in generally in the top 10, just doing that alone.
I think when we recruited during a server because somebody had to drop out due to real life issues or inactive, whatever, I think Feca, you were doing that. You're often looking at the people not with the highest influence, but the people that are communicative, that maybe even just reach out to you.
100%. And basically on any server, like I say, my number one value really is communication. Especially, we're lucky enough to often be one of the top alliances, so we generally get a ton of applications, you know. And we had that one guy drop in server one. We had like 80 plus applications, and I had one guy message me on Discord and be like, hey, you haven't gotten back to my invitation. Like, you know, can I play with you? And like, lo and behold, like that's the guy I chose. I was like, you know what, man? Like he was by far one of the lower influence ones. Not so bad that like clearly he doesn't know how to play, but lower in the fact that like I had some more top candidates that I could choose from. Me as a leader, I'm gonna love the guys I can talk to, and especially mentioning earlier where people like if you're gonna make your own alliance in the area, I think that's the best thing. I love recruiting alliance leaders because that means they at least are willing to take that first step. And then obviously I always have open officer positions, other stuff. The more work you want to do, the better. And just showing that initiative really is the very first step in what I think becoming like a high level players. Of course, there's a lot of high level players that don't communicate a ton, and that's totally fine also. And we have our little XY grid where we do communication by influence, and we see that does happen sometimes. But the guys I'm personally looking for are the guys I can work with and tell me what's wrong. Tell me if you're going to be AFK for a day or two. Tell me if there's a bug you're dealing with. And 90% of the time, we've at least come up with a workaround. You know what I mean? But the people that sit there, they'll be like, oh, I haven't been able to play for the last 3 days because this bug. We're like, dude, we all know the answer to this bug. If you would have just told us that 3 days ago, we could have worked you through that, or at least gotten like pinged the right people, or that's what your
communication
that's why
is.
That's why you're in an alliance. It's a team game at the end of the day. I know a lot of people. It is
You're
cool to do
married
stuff
for
like
2 months.
That's very true.
And that's the truth, isn't it? Like your ideal player is somebody who has like Discord on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
And bonus points to those who actually can remote in from their mobile phone and handle their in-game stuff. Like, hey, you're being attacked. Move your fleets.
Right.
I specifically said that I'm unwilling to do that. If I walk away from the game, I need to be able to clear my head. Otherwise, I'll lose the remaining few hairs I have on my head.
I'm consumed. Yeah, I'm on it 24/7. I get my phone number out. I'm like, call me in the middle of the night if something I'm not gonna let, like in my mindset, right? We're 6 weeks into a server. I've like been married for 6 weeks. If one attack's coming at 3 a.m. and we think it's a real one, I'm like, just go ahead and call me. I can hop on my phone real quick.
I've started naming some of my gray hairs on certain players.
But I mean, we've made a point that during the beginning of the server or the lead up to it, we gave people we did a role select thing, and one of the points we asked was like, how much time are you willing to commit to this game? And we don't require everybody to be on 24/7, but if we can communicate about that beforehand, we'll know, okay, you do 8 hours a day, you do 24, you maybe only do 2. That way we can manage those expectations and not be upset that someone might only log in twice a day.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're only able to... Go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing I haven't done, but I would like to, is create kind of like a 24-hour schedule so I can see which players play during what time, periods of activity, let's say server time.
Yeah, and we've experimented with that. And obviously, we have all the ones with time zones, but then like time zone really doesn't mean anything based off because some people either if you're working alternative hours, you're working from home sometimes, or not working. Those guys are on all the time, right? Or random things come up. You have an appointment, you can't be on it this day, and then you look at a chart that says, "Oh, well, he said he's on from 8 to 10 every day." And then you have an appointment, which 100% is fine again. But yeah, it's really hard to manage stuff like that. But this also goes back into the communication with your leadership, just letting us know so we're not doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, all this then boils down to the expectations are let in place in the front end, but those expectations can't be met without having a highly communicative alliance in the first place. And ultimately, what separates pre-made level play from your new guys that come in is our communication is top notch. I mean, I'm getting at least 10, 15 pings a day. I expect that things are happening that we're going to need to respond to them. And most, not all those pings are going to directly relate to me, but it's at least important that I'm at least cognizant and aware of what's going on within the alliance and the coalition.
Well, and that's a good segue into your next point here. One thing I see that Gravity has above and beyond Singularity by far is its capability to delegate too.
Yeah, that's something we've worked on extensively because we saw the need, right? After season 1, I think we might have had 4 players continue or something. Every player was so burnt out because at that time we were fighting Zorka and those guys gave it to us, man. they were saying of all times that we had to as well. And so that was our big focus coming into the tournament server, how to delegate more. And Nihilist, I think, really spearheaded this with, we called it originally the Nihilist organizational structure, the NOS. And he wrote up this big document about all the different roles people are going to take, all the different things we're going to do as leadership, how we're going to delegate officers for actual leads. And that kind of stuff, I think also, well, as a leader, as you're hitting that next step of leadership, you don't necessarily have to do this all of this the first time you ever go to lead an alliance, but it's definitely something to think about. How can you trust your players to do things that you can't do it all, right? To not have to be doing everything, because then you're going to burn out. Those type of leaders are only going to play one server. And that's, once again, my other big thing is, I'm trying to play 10 servers, right? I'm trying to get all the way out. That's how far I'm thinking. If I'm burnt out after one server, I'm going to go to a new game. And that's not obviously what you want when you're trying to set up an alliance.
I think one thing you want to find out is player agency, like how much do certain people want to be involved? Mm-hmm. And while certain people are like really happy to just get a message saying like, hey, can you do this or that? And they're like, just respond to it, they'll do it. While others want to feel more in charge of making decisions, be more involved. I think finding a way, again, this is communication, just to find out like where people stand on that means that you can get the ones that want to be involved, make use of them and their abilities, and know which ones don't, and then just adapt to that.
Yeah, a pro tip there for alliance leaders, and I can't explain why, but it seems like we get so much more cooperation from players once we direct message them.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I wouldn't be against trying anything. You know what I mean? Some people are like, they'll never type, but then you hop in voice and they want to talk to you all day, which is awesome too. I love that part as well. But then everyone has their kind of different amounts of how they want to communicate. And sometimes it just takes, figuring out how does this person respond best, because some people hate getting pinged. You know what I mean? Like, don't private message, don't do that here at everybody. I only want to know when it's the absolute thing. And you have to cater to those people as well, So knowing your people, I think, is a kind of a little bit of a segue there to leadership too. Is like, that's the biggest part, I think, about leadership. Not only getting to know your people, you should be a reasonable guy, passionate guy, but also within your alliance, it's also kind of your job to get to know your enemies as well. Who's in my next sector? Have I talked to that leader yet? And just message those guys, and getting that kind of conversation started with pretty much everyone, and getting to know people is a huge advantage I think you can take out as a new leader.
So we kind of glossed over this topic kind of in the beginning a little bit, and I think that talking about delegations is kind of a way of bringing it back to it. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you don't have to necessarily be an alliance leader to be a leader within your alliance. Like Feca, for us, he's our alliance leader for Gravity, but Nihilist is our boy who does a lot of the military work. Bronx manages a lot of the industrial work. Our boy Eboats is...
You got mixed up.
You got it all backwards, but that's the point. We have a lot of leaders. We have the industrial lead, which is Nihilist, and then Branx and intelligence, and then you got Nonix and Jack for military.
So you don't need to be the alliance leader to be a leader within your group. Like, back to my first, back when I was building my very first alliance, which was in Vulpecula back in the day. I was organizing several different alliance leaders, and I was just expecting to be a player within that group. But because of the efforts I made of pushing it, I ended up becoming an alliance leader. But it was from a position like, underneath other leaders that I was working towards, and a greater goal. I was trying to bring other players together. So the point is, you don't have to be like de facto alliance leader to still make, big impacts and big decisions.
Yeah, or to lead by example. A good leader is a social binder, the one that like binds it all together, brings together the people that can make the good decisions or organize stuff. It's like you lead on the same level as everybody else. Like, to me, is a good leader, not standing on top of everybody else and shouting orders, but like being amongst the group of people who do the leading together.
right?
Yes, exactly. Like you don't want to tell them, "Hey, this is your order because I'm the alliance leader or because I say so." It's like, "Hey, like this is what we need and here's why. Can you do this? No, okay, I'll go on to someone else."
Yeah. And any alliance leaders that I've seen in the game that have been pushy like that, or that we've been told are kind of pushy, those guys never last. Like the guys that we've played against, even the our enemy alliance leaders, if you will, those guys are also very, they're very good at working with their player base. They're not the guys that you have to do this. No, they wouldn't make it. So those type of leaders definitely don't. They don't make it.
Often
Yeah.
I see alliances that have these like very militaristic leaders, or that just really want to push people around. After some time, you'll see some sort of uprising within that alliance, and then all of a sudden that person is gone, and somebody else is now the leader of that group.
Yeah, and that really is the thing right there. It's like, look at a CEO or a president. They don't know everything. They hire the people who know more than them. And so on that note, don't think you're right because you're the leader. Actually be open to feedback and opinions and advice. Treat it more of a democracy and decision making where that can be done.
And sometimes that's swallowing your pride, cutting your ego and just being like, maybe I'm not right in this scenario, or just knowing yourself enough to know that, like, okay, this person's judgment is better than mine in this case. All that stuff really helps you out in the long run.
Ebuts here asked a good question on the fly. Who are some of the leaders outside of our coalition or in other alliances that we've been impressed by, that stand out to us?
So I got a really good example for this. One of the big, I would say, blunders that I wish I could have gotten to work in our way this server was losing Cassiopeia. Those guys over there they're kind of a prominent alliance now on the tournament server. And they actually ended up allying with Hegemony. And I would like to give a lot of credit to the way Biggles talked to them. And I'm very impressed by that's another part where you're going to constantly, at some point, every alliance leader is a decently cool guy, right? Like, or whatever. And it sucks to be like, you get there too late, or they've already done it, and like they've taken someone from you, and they actually ended up joining them instead of joining with us because of, I think, a really good political play. And I think that's something that leaders specifically, since it's your name on the alliance, whether or not you're actually leading the alliance or not, I think often those people have to be the ones doing the politics because that's the only name you get to see, and yeah, he's someone that is clearly rounding up people regardless of his questionable like tactics, and we're fighting them and we're like, oh, we got him easy. But regardless, the leadership qualities you can see kind of show through, at least from my perspective on the outside.
Yeah, and I agree. The inventor of the space flu, Biggles, he is a great guy. He does seem to be a great guy. I haven't had too much interaction with him, but from what I have had, he seems to be the right kind of guy to be a leader, and more than just one server. So I hope he comes back and does his coalition again. Or at the very least, I definitely see him as a good leader in Starborne. I think what's most important when I decide like what's a good leader and respectable is somebody who honors their word. Backstabbing is not the way to go with this game. Trying to be politically tricky is not the way to go. Be straight, honest, and straightforward. Say what you can and can't do, what you won't do, and when you do it, stick to it. Because that kind of repetition sticks with you.
Right. And that was one of the things we also, at one point, we were trying to negotiate a Christmas truce, right? And, many people weren't for it specifically because they're like, well, they'll just agree and then go back on it. And while that's true, we're going to play versus these people a lot of times, and that would get it out fairly early whether I can trust these guys in the future. And I know, and we sat there and they're like, oh, we don't really want to give an answer, and I was like, that's fine. And I'd rather you say that than be like, oh yeah, we'll do it. And then something back down, you know what I mean? Or something go wrong. So it was, I did respect the fact that like, you won't say anything at least. And if I felt if Biggles at that point were to say yes, either his alliance would go behind his back and it's good for us because that means there's creating some friction, or he'd at least, I would know from there on out, okay, you can no longer trust him, right? But I have no reason to think that now, and that's something, especially as if you lead multiple servers, you're going to see who do we want to be in a coalition with? Do we want to be guys that are potentially going to leave the coalition last second before lockdown and go to another one? Do they have a history of that? Yeah, by doing that team may have won that one round, but you're screwing yourself for so many servers in the future where every single time I'm going to get into things like those guys left our coalition last second. That was a really dirty move. So that's all kinds of stuff to think about as kind of your branding as a leader, regardless of whether you are actively trying to brand. It's just going to be there. It's going to follow you no matter what you do. You know what I mean?
And I can't help but say that like the leadership skills you develop in this game are directly attributable to real life. Like you'd be surprised how much this has helped me grow as a person in my own leadership for the company I work for.
No doubt on that. Transferable skills, 100%.
Well, shout out I have to give, talking about leaders that stand out to us. The server I started on, was it Alpha 8, Server 5, was the leading alliance was, does anybody remember the name? The leader, I remember.
A guy named
Tesco and Zarnes.
Together with
Zarnes, yeah.
The person I had contact with was Tesco, and even though he was the leader of the leading alliance that we later on fought, I could always talk to him, and he taught me a lot about the game. He was like very open about information that I didn't know back then, which that kind of inspired how I interact with people on the enemy team, so to speak. Just being open and like I don't want to hold back knowledge about the game from others. I want to fight people on the same ground, right?
Yeah,
just being chivalrous like that.
That was such a cool thing for them to do because to set the picture, we were the only other coalition in the game. We were literally their direct competition, and they knew we had explained we were kind of new, and they're constantly giving us pointers and being like, they like look at our clusters and be like, what are you guys doing? This is how you have to play the game. You're doing it wrong, which would be completely horrible for them. There's no reason for them to do it. They didn't have to do it. They would have, most of the time people just assume, you're going to quit the game and never play again. So like, why even bother? And it went a long way. And I think I also take that with me. Whenever a new alliance comes to me, I'm the first person to try to help give them, whatever information I need. And just, even if they're going to be the enemy, so that is a huge thing.
And I just want to respond to a comment here from Bastion. So one of the things a good leader also needs is to keep a cool head and not easily be offended. Look at our politicians. They're politicians for a reason. If you can't play the Game of Thrones or the House of Cards, whatever you want to call it, you got to be able to keep your cool. And if you think something might be offensive, first come from an inquisitive nature. And if that person is being toxic, then you might want to just cut communications with them, and that's kind of going into the politics type stuff.
I think that might be a good segue with what Nihilus asked. So his questions were, what can you advise to people that want to start their alliance, be it competitive or not? So obviously,
that was one of the Cult of Nihilus members. Not
a real Nihilus.
Got you. Yes.
This freaking cult, man. What's going on? Whiskey Camper asked, what can you advise to people wanting to start their own alliance? Obviously, being communicative with people and checking up on them is needed, but what other things can you say, like hardships or pointers or things to be careful of? Your point there on like toxicity, I think, is one of the hardships that you could describe.
I would say one of the first things is just being a people person and just really actually actively caring and getting to know, even if it's just your 3 people in your alliance, right? And it's like being part of them and really like letting them know, like, I got your back. I'm not just going to ditch you guys, leave you guys in this alliance if you guys are active and play. And that's honestly most of the hardships is like when you're in a leadership position, you have to make really tough decisions. And sometimes that is merging into another alliance. I think a lot of alliance leaders will do that early on, and that's what you can expect. merging into a larger alliance and saying, hey, we're going to create 2 alliances from this. One's going to be a quote, either like feeder or reserve alliance, and one's going to be the main alliance, and who gets to be in the main alliance. And I know that caused a lot of tension. But it just kind of plays into, I would say that's the first big hardship you will meet, because that's honestly the quickest way to be a small alliance leader into starting to become a big alliance leader. Is I knew too, like, and not necessarily, I didn't necessarily want to lead or kind of put in that position at first. I just knew at this time I have these like 10 guys. I need to put us in the best possible position for my 10 guys. Not for me. I'm thinking about my group here. And that's so maybe I need to merge into Admiral. Yeah. And that's what my original goal was to do. Go there, kind of learn the ins and outs. I have a little bit of like a political chip with me because I'm bringing some guys with me. It shows like I'm a normal person because they haven't all left me yet. They're willing to follow with me. So I think that's, for me, the biggest hardship is just the people aspect, man. I don't want to leave anyone. I don't want to kick anyone out. I don't want to do all that stuff, but it's all part of being here.
Exactly. Yeah. And accepting that you can't make everyone happy, but you should try.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta make those cuts. You gotta make those calls. Yeah. That a few people are going to suffer. So you have to, manage that as best you can. But what you're trying for the overall good for as many as you can get.
And learning from your mistakes. From your mistake. Like, in the A9S1, when I reached out to Bastion initially, I was trying very smoothly, politically talking to him about like working together, and it, he interpreted it as, oh, you just want to offer us second place. And that was just, my mistake was coming in that direction as opposed to maybe another word or phrasing I could have used. And that effectively ruined my opportunities politically and as a leader to make something happen there.
Ooh, that's an amazing point too. I would say the easiest way to do politics as a new player is, if you're not uncomfortable completely with getting in voice, talking to someone in voice is the biggest way to gain, some kind of trust, so they can hear you, so they don't misinterpret your context. Over text, a lot of things can get very construed very quickly, and you can say one thing, mean one thing, and they take it the other way, and they don't reply immediately, so you don't know that they took it that way. Whereas in voice, even if you can do like a 10-minute voice thing, even if you can do, I would say, if you don't like voice, even say, hey, can we do a voice call? I'll listen to you. I don't feel comfortable talking, or you can come up with whatever excuse and type to them back, and see how they react. But that's the quickest way to move very fast in politics, because you'll spend an entire day of texting what you can get done in 10 minutes of voice as well. So that's definitely another hardship, just not being misunderstood, and just being genuine. Yeah. Just be genuine. Yep. Just tell them the truth. You know what I mean?
Definitely can be like when you type out a text, you have your tonality and your inflection of the voice that you kind of have, but not having that when you're reading it, things come off a lot more cold and callous. And it's jumping in voice. If you can do it, it's the way to go.
S Hedgehog is talking about an RP initiative. I haven't seen this in general chat. If someone can add more context there, but that's something I think we're definitely interested in moving forward as well. This is a little bit off topic for me, but trying to have more fun with the game, I think, is something as an alliance leader you might have a lot of success with going into a game. I know we're talking about a lot. I don't want to drop as a pre-made coalition. It takes a lot of work to try to run, or be part of a 100-man coalition. Mm-hmm. So we're talking a lot about, we've already potentially say we'll get our win here, but we at least got our winner in season 1. I don't care about winning a random server, right? I'm there to have fun and play the game. I don't need, my ego doesn't need, these wins on, beta 2. So something we're talking about is doing some RP stuff, like the Space Cowboys. We've mentioned it so many times, but like just doing that for an entire server is just hilarious, and it's good, and everyone likes it. And even if they are murdering you, I would have to be murdered with a smile. It's just like crap.
Right, exactly. And you can do that with enemies. You can have fun and win or lose with a smile. In Alpha, what was it, Alpha 8? We lost, I think, against Cassius and his coalition. It was 2 coalitions against ours, and we actually lost that one. And but like every single battle, every time, Snookums, Cassius, and I, we'd all just get together and talk. And at the player meetup, some of my worst rivals and quote unquote enemies were actually great people. And being able to have those friendships is and a server with more friends than you started with, to me, that's a true victory condition right there. That's like
Admiral
better
losing?
than any GT.
Oh, without a doubt, man. Leaving with friends is the coolest part. And that's honestly how you keep your players. Why, as a leader, why do your players want to play with you opposed to someone else? And a lot of times it can be, because they make great game moves or this or that. But I would say a lot of the core has to at least like you on some level, you know what I mean? And that has to do with, just being friends, going out. And a lot of times, we hop on voice. It's not always game, you know what I mean? We get in there, we just goof off about even our real lives and stuff. And that kind of stuff, I'm so much more likely, unintentionally to just defend someone that I just had a conversation, opposed to some random person that I don't know if they're even playing or what's going on or whatever. That's always been one of my big things too. And then also I always like to think this also deals with how you protect against spies, right? I'm like, all right, if a spy ever came to my Discord, what are the chances he would just really like us and want to flip? Because we're going to sit here and talk all the time. And the amount of effort we would require from a said spy, I would always hope, it came back and was like, no, actually, I just want to play with you guys because I've spent so much time with you. And that's obviously just my hope, but I do like to think like that.
We got some good questions here that I'd like us to touch on. Eboat's asked several times because it's a really good question he wants to get in. How do you get players that are focused on the single player aspect into alliance play, working together as a group? What are your thoughts and ideas on that?
Who is that directed at?
All of us. And I'll just go ahead then and answer from my perspective. For me, it was if you're part of our group, we have got this meme going on gravity number 1, right? We're full of ourselves, but
yes, we are.
I think we deserve it, kind of what we achieve together. But making people understand that achieving as an alliance, a lot of things you only do if you really come together and work together. That means that some people build chips for others, means that we send resources to upgrade our structures together, build our FABs, our alliance stations, just getting the people to understand that there are these things that we have a use of together, stuff we can build together that we all benefit from. Doing that and then having this small competition, tracking how much resources we all donate to our alliance station, for example, get some people interested on being the number 1 of the guy that donates the most resources.
Yeah, we already know who won that.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal competition within Gravity for sure. And that's definitely something we try to push as much as we can, because the more that you do that, realistically, what one person does doesn't matter, but you need a bunch of those one people to.
Well, I can tell you the wrong response to talking to a solo player to join your alliance would be join or die.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of the
absolutely,
especially because.
But a lot of people do it. Bend the knee, exactly.
Yeah, I'd just fight you harder if you do that to me.
That's the thing. That's what everyone will do. You can't come at it that way. It has to be hey, I really want to play with you. I see what you're doing. That's awesome. Why don't we work together? You're not in an alliance. Why not?
Definitely.
So just basically encouraging people, right?
Yeah, it's either.
What I like is when I talk to people and I understand that they're looking at how does this game work exactly? They start talking about numbers. I'm I try to understand do you like spreadsheets or not? And if the answer is yes, then I've got you. Right? That's how I draw you in and keep you there.
That's Bronx's opener. The few times the politics. Do you like spreadsheets?
But that's not for everyone.
Something they can bring to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for the solo players, if on the whole join or die thing, there's no real point to say join or die if to a player, like from a leadership perspective, like if they're kind of in their small little corner in the sector and they're not even holding like a GT, why do they have to die? Like, why don't they just live peacefully? If they don't want to join, then cool. We reached out, we tried, but don't need to die.
Yeah, if they don't want to join, just like, hey, all right, well then in this case, you know, why don't you just do your own thing and just don't attack any of us, and we can work together that way.
And by work together, we mean like wait until they burn out on the game, and then
quit.
Then they're a better farm.
Yeah, because that's the truth. If you're not in an alliance, you're not part of a community, and that's the only thing keeping you in this game. In my opinion, that is the single most important key aspect for retention is community. And like when you play another game and you join a guild or a clan or whatever, or an organization, what keeps you around is that community. We accomplish things together. You know, we're raiding together. When you play a game by yourself, you're not going to stick around. That's just a belief of mine.
Especially with the state of the game, we're all accustomed to. I would say that's stronger and stronger. And you can see that with the retention of players in general. Something we've been very proud of is the fact that we've only had, in both our server 1 and this server, we've only had 2 total people drop from our alliance, and both had incredibly buggy starts where many other alliances lost a ton of people. And even those 2 people both reached out to me. He's like, hey, I just can't do this with where my real life is. And I really want to play with you guys later on. You know what I mean? If it comes up, it's like, I'm just sorry, I can't do this, going through all this. So, and I do truly believe that has to do a lot with our community and the way we try to bring people together.
With all the experience you have, right, coming into this game and having been here a while in a leadership position, what do you think is the difference between leading newer players and leading veterans? And how do you deal with that difference?
You know, in Alpha 8, I pulled one of the biggest mistakes of my life, and I joined the wrong sector. So all of my pre-made alliance was across the entire galaxy, and it was just me and one other guy in the wrong sector. And I ended up just doing my deal. I recruited anyone who looked active. I called the people who were inactive, and I continued recruiting active people. And before long, we were number 1 in influence. And these people, given the opportunity to play together and all be active, there was a lot of education, a lot more than I was used to. But you know, it's just one of those things. You know, maybe you delegate that to say, hey, I want you to just focus on helping people look at their station setup, look at, you know, count their fleets. Are they building ships? Are they keeping their queues full? And help them that way. That, in fact, that's what inspired my first series of tutorial videos, because I was in this alliance with a lot of newbies. And so just educating them, and believe it or not, they will surprise you, man. That server, we had some newbies coming in, becoming hard hitters by the end of alpha, and surprised the stuff out of me.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So I haven't personally gotten like a ton of experience with the first one. Obviously, in our first game, you always don't know anyone. And as far as leading a new alliance, I think it's just patience is the big difference. But I would also argue you still need patience even with the big alliance. You know what I mean? Like you got to trust your players. I think a lot of the core stuff is still there. But it is a matter of, I don't think if anyone ever asks a question, you should be like, oh my God, why did you ask that question? Whether in a big alliance or in a small alliance, right? It's taking everyone and kind of treating everyone the same in my personal experience. When you have a newer alliance, I think one of the biggest differences would be, you know, setting realistic goals. And because you're going to have to do those to keep those players involved, especially if you're not lucky enough to become the number 1 alliance, or you didn't have that many active people in your sector and you're kind of a new alliance leader in a smaller sector. And saying, hey guys, maybe we could just, you know, get 1 GT. What if we get 5? What if we try to unlock our dice this year? I know we're not going to win this game, but like this is something I want to go, and you got to give your guys kind of some kind of hope, or else they're not going to log back on, right? And obviously with the alternative win conditions, I think that's one of the big goals. But as an alliance leader, it's almost just as much your job to keep your people interested as it is the games, and that's kind of unfortunate. But that is almost part of what being a leader is, you know, is managing your people and making them realize, like, please, like, keep coming back to us. And then the community, obviously, that will build up over time. But I think that's one of the biggest ways of running a new alliance when you can't go for the win.
A good leader definitely has to be one of the most active. That's definitely true, because I've heard of stories where, you know, players come to me and they tell me, like, you know, I really love this game, I'm doing really well, but my leader quit and I'm hosed.
Right. Yeah. We got another good question. What makes someone good at politics in your opinion? What would you guys say?
Honestly,
Being honest, like
People
straightforward.
try too hard. Some people try too hard. It's like, it's not a hard job if you just speak honest, true, and kind. Like, treat others how you want to be treated.
be genuine.
It's that simple. And be straightforward. You know, can we make something work out? You know, it's like, if this person was right in front of you in real life, how would you talk to them?
Yeah.
To me, I think people treat, this is really just my personal opinion, treat the politics in this game too much like real world. Like, this isn't statecraft, it's a game. Like, I would just ask a group, the leader of a group, like, hey, do you want to work together or do you want to fight us? Just be straight with me. Like, no, I want to fight you. Okay, cool, let's have fun.
Shady stuff is awful. The one word I was going to use is just genuine. Like, to be genuine, I think goes so far. Even if like an enemy alliance leader just says, "Hey, we're going to fight you," like Branx just said, like, we're just going to attack you guys, and that's kind of where we in season 10 we ended up accidentally spawning on top of Winged Czars, and I gave it everything I got to try to do some kind of, like, you know, negotiations, and I was really hoping to pull it out for my team so we could not fight each other right as soon as the SA drops. But of course, you know, after like, you know, a day or two of I'm talking to them, they're like, "Oh, let us think about it." Him is John Talking Gambler, you know, and I at one point I finally think I'm getting through to Gambler, and he's like, "Oh, you know, I don't know, you know, it really is Jotak's call," and Jotak just gets on. He's like, "It's war." And I was like, no. And, like, you know, sometimes you can't do it all, right? But the least you can do, especially as other alliance leader, just be honest. Just tell me, man. Don't skate me around forever. Don't like do this up, because that's going to have a really bad tone on me. I really do respect the straightforwardness of that. So that's something I would say really is the number one thing, because the shadiness won't get you but so far, man. Like, they're going to know, oh, that's a shady guy. Like, and that's not great.
And run your diplomacy by your alliance. It affects them just as much. It's like, hey, I'm going to get back to you. I want to talk to my coalition or my alliance members, see what they think, and we'll get back to you. And then if they're against it, then you go back to the person you're speaking to. Is like, hey, you know, I'm totally for this, but, you know, as a group, they wanted to go pursue another path. I hope in the future we can work together. Let's keep in touch.
I also think just don't be upset about some of the decisions other alliances make. Like, if you reach out to an alliance with like a peace offer and they decline, it's so I think at times it isn't anything personal. At times it's just like, these guys, they might see you as a good opponent and they want to have fun in a PvP game, have a good fight. So instead of fighting with you against a lot of people that they think aren't strong, they'd rather fight you, who they perceive as strong, to have a good match, an interesting match.
I would add on to that, it's good to have a level of humility, but also at the same time knowing when you're going to take, you know, crap from this person you're talking to. Like, sometimes they're just going to try to troll or instigate or inflame, and know your boundaries, but also be humble about it, you know, like how you speak with people.
Absolutely, man.
I
just couldn't preach that enough.
I talk to every alliance leader or political representative as if they are my equal. But if they start, you know, making demands that I can't in any way, you know, accept, or will my alliance members agree to, it's like, okay, well, what's another way we can go about this?
I kind of a little tangent on that is holding off your emotions a lot of times, because I've been in several conversations, where I'll get called in with Admiral to deal with some situation of some really, really upset guy, and you kind of like, they'll be yelling at you, like you're actually getting yelled at for playing a video game, but you just have to keep your cool and not yell back at them. Like, that'll never solve anything, and it's like sitting there and keeping it like, this is what's going on, man. And maybe you might get a little more stern, but like you're getting all this stuff and trying to keep your emotions out of it, not saying anything that you're going to regret later, or like making sure you watch, like being reasonable with people. And that's back to the treat other people as you want to be treated. But
I'm happy that you are our Diplo, because I would walk into this in conversation just go like, why you have to be mad? It's only a game. And they just hate me even more, I think.
In games like this, people are emotionally charged sometimes, and those are the most difficult times, when people are emotionally charged against you, maybe because of what somebody else did or said, or maybe your own, Freudian slip. And the idea is to come with a position of empathy, almost like saying, hey, dude, I totally see where you're coming from. I get how you must be feeling. Like, I'm sorry for XYZ. Doesn't make you any less of a man. But, let's try this again. Let's start over. Let's talk about the subject here.
Mm-hmm. And people can easily get emotionally charged over this game because your time investment it's a lot. You got to put a month in to this game. You got to put 2 months into this game. That's a lot of time you're investing. So it's easy for someone to get that way emotionally.
People freak out and get absurdly mad over a 15 or 20 minute game. You know what I mean? Like in a 20-minute match of Call of Duty or something, you have people throwing controllers to the wall. It's like, now that built up emotions, almost 2 months through, where you're talking to this guy and he just wants to scream at you, and you can't even blame him. You know what I mean? Like, maybe just a bad circumstance, but you have to be able to talk to him. Like you were saying earlier, like talk to everyone the same. How I judge a lot of leaders too is like, a lot of people are like, oh, my leader's really, really good. Like, he talks to us really kindly and stuff, but then he'll go and yell at someone else or talk to someone else, like kind of degrading. And I'm like, I want to be allied up with people that talk to me, their ally, the same way you talk to their enemy. Talk to me, their enemy, the same way as you talk to their allies, and just with respect, really. I think that goes a long way as well. If someone, even if we disagree completely, if I feel like I can respect you because you're not just going off, you know what I mean? You can get your thoughts under control. I'm much more likely to work with that person moving forward.
All right, so time is running out for us. Something I want to get in quick fire. The number one thing that the number one change you want as a leader, as an alliance leader for this game. Go.
More communication.
Oh man. I think in-game communication, in-game, like instant one that I could just have alliance assaults, be able to kick people off an alliance assault. That would be huge. We need a role for that so bad, because you set up an alliance assault, you ping all the correct people, and like, you guys are the ones that sign up for the alliance assault, and then you just have random people jumping in there, that think they're helping, and a lot of times that's how it goes. I mean, just anybody can join it. But any kind of those in-game communication tools to speed that up, to help that.
Map markers.
Yeah, like map markers, stuff like that. That would go so far and help out so much.
Admiral, what's your...
Well, okay. So I have one feasible and one less feasible. The feasible one is in-game statistics showing me who's contributing ships, who's contributing resources, who's doing all kinds of different deals, solar flares, everything. There's 1,000 different metrics that we can measure your performance by, and also being able to see your fleets, being able to see your stations, being able to truly help out even more. That's the feasible. The less feasible one is totally rebalancing the game a little bit more towards the solo player, so that less coordination and communication is required.
Oh yeah. Okay, my thing would be fleet operating limits. We used to see them on stations that we were deployed to. Now we don't. My job as a Tian Chao is often to spy friendly stations to figure out how many ships are there, how many ships can we fit into the station. If we're in an alliance with each other, please just let me click on the station of another alliance member and see how many ships are there, what's the max, and maybe even give me info on how many ships would there be once all deployments go through? That's my biggest gripe right now.
Maybe just like an available API. So that are like really techie people, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that one. But now you said two, you're cheating.
Yeah.
Well, here's my third. Let me control all fleets on the FAB.
Ooh.
Oh, leading up to Alpha 9, when they announced FOBs, the way I read the announcement, it sounded to me like these Sky Marshals would be able to control all the ships on the FOB, which it filled me with joy, but then we didn't get that at all.
You theoretically control them by moving them. But yeah, you can't attack.
But like managing all the people that can be on a FOB is sometimes like herding cats.
Yeah.
I'd rather have 2 or 3 people on the FOB than like throwing 10 on there. It's terrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And especially early on, that's where you end up. Like later in the game, you can have 2 people at 40 each. Hopefully the FOBs come down a little bit. I'm a big advocate of going back down to 60.
Yes.
But in general, especially early on, when you're just trying to fill that thing up, maybe I think a lot of alliances have like one early FOB going around knocking out GTs, but you'll have so many people on that thing. Everybody, said they're 2 Corvette fleets or something. You know what I mean? Like whatever you have in the beginning, that can be a lot to deal with.
Okay, to finish things off, are you in favor of the current size of alliances and coalitions, or do you want the size to go down again?
I had a pretty interesting take on this one because I loved the idea of them going up originally. I was like, man, that's so cool because first of all, you need less leaders because you have bigger alliances. So, and that's just, I think, with the lack of leaders in the game and being able to control a bunch of people is just helpful. I have quickly turned my opinion. I'm now much more in favor back of getting to about 20 people, going back down to the 3 alliances of three alliances in a coalition. And I just think because it's so much more manageable, and I think really, and once more leadership tools get into the game, I think it'll be more manageable to have a bunch more smaller alliances. But currently with the game, I thought it was going to be an easy fix just to make way bigger alliances. But oh man, it just causes even more of a mess. 100 man is tough. 60 man is, in my opinion, much more manageable, and even that's tough.
What's your take on this, Admiral?
Give me a battle royale mode.
Interesting answer to that question.
5,000 people, Libra. The other sectors are closed. GG. No alliances.
But yeah, I think once they make things easier for leaders, maybe we could talk about maybe creeping it up a little bit again. But it is really just too much to deal with. And like, especially for one leader, right? Like to divvy up to make sure everyone feels like they're involved is often tough, and especially now that we got 25 people, we have 1,000,001 things we need to be doing at any given time with all these objectives we're looking to solve. But for one person to look over it, obviously that's delegation, but even for 4 or 5 people to make sure everyone's involved can get tough. Coming down to 25 coming back down to 20 would help.
Alrighty, guys. Well, I think that's a pretty good place for us to wrap up now. We covered a lot of different questions and topics today. Glad that we were able to do this in the official Discord, so thank EXO for that. Admiral, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
Definitely avoided having you on right away so that we could minimize like the bias towards the podcast. We wanted this to be a very community open thing. Like we're trying to help reach out to all players here and be a positive thing in the community. So for those that have a negative disposition towards you, we definitely put you off for a little bit there.
And I recommend that people who might discover this podcast or listen to a couple of episodes, if there are any things that you think we should talk about, any topic about this game that you really want us to bring up, do not hesitate to DM us.
The BBC. I'm sorry. Why you should submit to the BBC?
Yeah. And then on that note too, if you want to be on the podcast or you think you'd have a really good outlook or something to talk about, definitely message any of us. I've been doing a lot of the grabbing of the people. I will definitely get back to you as I'm always looking for new cool ideas and topics, but especially as tournament server ends, depending on how long it is until a new server comes up, it'll be we have all kinds of leeway to pretty much talk about whatever we want. So if you think anything's interesting, as well as just letting us know cool topics, if you really, really want to be on, we're super open to that as well.
Or if you want to see anyone specifically as a guest, definitely just hit us up with any of your ideas. PM either me, Bronx, or Feca. Once you submit to the Sing block, you never go back. Ping Nihilist.
Join the cult.
Join the cult.
Join. The picture's on Reddit. Oh, go get on Reddit too, guys. Let's make that a thing.
Yeah.
I posted like 5 things on Reddit as the only 5 things there ever was. So.
Reddit memes. Here we go.
Reddit. Reddit.
Reddit is dead. Long live Reddit.
Reddit is dead. Long live Reddit.
GVT number 1, Sing number 2.
Oof.
Keep up that fight against boredom, everyone.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
See you guys.
See you guys. We can probably